At the party, a regular guy in a three-piece suit sat on the sidelines, quietly scrolling on his tablet. The event was a wedding rehearsal dinner dance featuring two couples, Gary Harris and Belinda Cummings, and Jason Witten and Melissa Foster. Gary, tall, with wavy blonde hair and blue eyes, mingled with the guests, while Belinda, shorter, with curly brown hair and a remarkable figure, stood out next to Melissa, whose long blonde hair complemented her smaller frame. G and Jason had been friends since grade school, while Belinda and Melissa became close in college. Gary made the rounds, introducing himself to unfamiliar faces until he noticed a man alone with a clipboard and approached with a friendly smile, extending his hand. "Hey, I'm Gary Harris, one of the best men." Gary introduced himself and shook the man's hand. "I'm Preston Fulton, but everyone calls me Press," the man replied. "Which bride or groom are you here for?" Gary asked with a broader smile. "Actually, I'm here for you and for Jason," Press said, "but I need to talk to you first, and then, if you'll excuse me, I'd like to talk to you and Jason together." Gary felt uncomfortable with this request. "You have an advantage over me," he said. "What exactly do you want to talk to me about?" "Actually, what do you need to talk to Jason and me about?" Press pulled an envelope from his pocket. "I think this letter will explain most of my intentions. If you don't want to hear any more after reading it, then I will talk to Jason alone." Gary opened the envelope and began to read, stunned to see it was from his father, but the contents shook him to the core. "Dear son, it pains me deeply to have to send Mr. Fulton to deliver this message. To be blunt, Belinda has betrayed you and Mr. Fulton as proof. After you see the evidence, I ask you to take Mr. Fulton's advice. I have hired him, the firm he works for, because they offer much more than proof of your future wife's infidelity. Please listen to Mr. Fulton and take him at his word. My mother and I love you, and I am truly sorry that you have been betrayed in such an insulting way. If you need someone to talk to after this sad affair is over, I will always be there for you. Love, Dad." Gary read the letter over and over again and could not believe what it said. He adored Belinda with all his heart and saw her as his perfect match. She had all the qualities he cherished: beauty, intelligence, wit, and affection. How could she betray him? Although he questioned his father's accuracy and considered the possibility that the letter might have been forged, Gary couldn't shake his confusion over the accusation against his future wife. "I don't believe my father," Gary said, becoming increasingly angry. "If it was true, he would have told me himself." "Let me introduce myself," Press said, handing Gary a business card. It read I Am Inc., with Preston Fulton Field representative at the bottom. Gary was confused and suspicious. "What me Inc.?" he asked. "It stands for male equality." Press explained what it's all about. Gary was now furious. "Our organization aims to restore gender equality by countering the effects of groups like now," Press said calmly. "They've influenced attitudes that may be affecting your fiancé's actions." "That's absurd," Gary objected. "What does this have to do with Belinda cheating on me directly?" "Nothing, but it addresses the societal context that influences her behavior," Press replied. Press paused to make sure Gary's attention wasn't focused solely on Belinda's thoughts. For example, many elementary school teachers, predominantly women, consistently give boys lower grades, perpetuating negative perceptions of masculinity. This societal trend affects generations, leading to dependency and underrepresentation in higher education and science. Meehan aims to reverse this cycle. Gary felt his composure slip away. Moments ago, he had been elated. Now he was seething with frustration. He had to confirm Belinda's infidelity. "All right, but where's the proof?" Press placed a reassuring hand on Gary's arm. "Before I reveal the truth to Ince, heed your father's advice. Once you see the tapes, you'll probably want to confront your fiancé immediately, but acting impulsively will undermine your chance for true revenge. This isn't just about retaliation. It's about sending a strong message. Can I trust you to stay calm?" Gary's heart was pounding, and his palms were sweating. After a moment he nodded, "Whether you confront them tonight or not. I still need to talk to you and Jason. It won't change the current situation, but it will secure your future." Gary confirmed with another nod. "Mr. Fulton nodded in satisfaction as he tapped the start button on the screen and handed the tablet to Gary. Within moments, Gary saw Belinda cozying up to unknown men. Although the lack of timestamps initially eased Gary's concerns, his mood changed when a video showed Belinda with an ex-boyfriend just days after they had agreed to exclusivity for New Year's Eve, contradicting their agreement. Subsequent videos spanning their 6-month engagement revealed Belinda's involvement with several men, including some of Gary's friends. The final video nearly caused Gary to erupt at the rehearsal party. It showed Belinda and Gary's best man, Spencer Tolliver, engaging in carnal activities in Gary's apartment. The accompanying dialogue, in which Belinda expressed her intention to continue their liaison after the wedding, fueled Gary's anger. Although he fought the urge to react impulsively, the betrayal gnawed him. Press noticed Gary's distressed expression and took a bottle from his pocket, offering it to ease Gary's discomfort. "Are you feeling better?" inquired Mr. Fulton. "Your reaction is common when caught off guard. I'll explain to you in a moment how we're going to deal with this, but take comfort in the fact that you're discovering Belinda's betrayal now rather than years later, possibly with children involved." As soon as Gary calmed down, the press urged him to get Jason. Gary had to reveal Belinda's infidelity to his friend before tomorrow's ceremony, although Jason didn't face the same dilemma. It was crucial for both of their futures to hear press advice. After a few minutes, Gary managed to pull Jason away from the groom, insisting that it was urgent. Gary whispered in Jason's ear as they left. Initially skeptical, Jason hesitated until Gary provided more context about Belinda's deception. Jason, like Gary, doubted the message. However, instead of showing Jason the video, Mr. Fulton presented 3 incriminating photos of Belinda's infidelity, while the seated press recorded their conversation on a clipboard and elaborated on his organization's mission. He planned to review his presentation for improvement and send a copy to headquarters for evaluation. Emmy Inc. continued to strive for growth, member protection, and effective information dissemination. Press expressed his sympathy for Belinda's actions and provided Gary with a packet detailing his responsibilities for the ceremony. He then gave each young man a book outlining the challenges of Emmy Inc.'s mission and recommendations for married life. The book reinforced Press's advice and emphasized that their fathers had secured lifetime memberships for them. After making sure Gary remained composed, Press nodded in agreement as Gary informed Belinda that he was going to his parents' house due to stomach problems, a prearranged excuse to keep a wedding tradition. Gary said goodbye to Belinda with a simple peck on the cheek, and she continued to enjoy the festivities, albeit with some confusion about her behavior tolerated due to the impending wedding, and left the control room with his coat, Press ready to leave. With upcoming commitments, including overseeing Gary's wedding tomorrow and a subsequent meeting, he looked forward to returning home to his family. Wrapped in his scarf and winter coat, Press stepped into the frigid Ohio night where snowflakes swirled in the overcast sky, hinting at a looming blizzard. He longed for the warmth of sunny South Florida, Driving on Interstate 20 toward East Cleveland, Press easily located the main campus of the vast Cleveland Clinic. Despite the usual parking challenges, the nearly empty lot facilitated a quick spot. After navigating the building and checking in, Press searched for his next task. Much of the groundwork was completed, but some on-site tasks remained, spotting Ben Sharpen in the cafeteria. Press approached despite being 49. Ben appeared much older, his weary appearance suggesting a life devoid of joy. "I'm Preston Fulton." Press introduced himself. "You can call me Press. I work for me and aiming to assist people like you." The man rose and shook his hand. "Nice to meet you, but nothing about my ex-wife. Connie would surprise me, and frankly, I doubt you can help." He said I couldn't care less about Connie's actions or my kids. "I believe I have information that may interest you. But first, can you tell me about your marriage and divorce?" Press prompted. "Not much to tell." Ben shrugged. "We married young and things went downhill quickly. Connie's jobs caused problems, especially after she got pregnant. I considered divorce many times, but ended up enduring it for the kids. Eventually, I caught her cheating, filed for divorce, but got a raw deal in court." Ben shook his head and took a sip of coffee. 12 years of marriage wasted. He sighed. "Caught her in our bed with a UPS man. Should have hired a better lawyer." "Tell me about the final divorce decree." Press inquired. "After I became head of the X-ray department and started making a decent living, the judge left me with barely what I made in the first place. Connie got the house, and I'm stuck paying the bills while she goes off with her lovers, thanks to alimony and child support. The lawyers say I'm powerless." Ben explained bitterly. "This is one of the worst injustices I've seen the press sympathize with. We have to do something. I appreciate it, but I only have 2 more alimony payments to make, and I'm done with these kids," Ben replied. His resentment was evident. "Connie has been poisoning them against me since day one. I'm helpless right now, but I'm grateful you're on my side." Press opened his briefcase and said, "There's more you need to know. This could change things significantly." "What is it?" Ben asked curiously. "Mr. Sharpen? None of these 3 children are yours," Press explained, putting DNA tests on the table. "That deceitful woman." Ben shouted, slamming his fist on the table, attracting attention in the cafeteria. But the noise resumed. After a moment, the press noticed a change in Ben's demeanor. His voice was subdued. "It's not much of a relief, considering I'm almost done with the alimony. At least I won't feel guilty about hating those kids." "No, your relief is just beginning," Press reassured with a smile. "Let me explain. We have identified the real fathers of all 3 children. They're successful married men, and we're suing them to get back the child support you paid, which is in the tens of thousands of dollars. Your wives will learn of your infidelity, possibly resulting in divorce." Ben sat in disbelief. "Is this real?" "Absolutely, and there's more to come. We will correct all injustices," Press assured. "Why are you helping me?" Ben asked, concern evident. "I can't afford it." "Don't worry, Ben. This is pro bono. Our company is committed to equal rights for men and women." Press clarified that I had no idea such an organization exists, Ben noted. "But how do you finance your activities?" "We use the interest from our capital fund." Press explained that we're constantly attracting new members who pay initiation and annual fees. All funds raised go into our capital fund, which is currently approaching $2 billion. We also get support from benefactors for lobbying and our endowment, but I haven't paid anything and I can't afford to," Ben objected. "Relax, Ben. Your case is pro bono. Mank is covering all expenses," Press assured him. "I don't know how to thank you," Ben said gratefully. "No need to thank us yet. Let me explain further," Press continued. "Your ex-wife deceived the court. She has a legal income from selling drugs, even during your marriage. We've traced and seized her funds. Tomorrow she'll find her money gone, but that's just the beginning. The police will search her old house, where she's now been caught with enough drugs to be considered a major supplier, and we suspect her involvement in a teenager's addiction to her meds, which will likely result in a 15-year sentence. Her children and former lovers will also be charged, ensuring that she will spend years behind bars." Ben's eyes widened as he absorbed the information. "Here's the most important part," the Press went on. "The brokerage house and law firm that employed the people involved in your wife's pregnancy are being sued for exploiting both of you. We anticipate substantial 7-figure settlements for each of you. If you choose, you can use this money to purchase a lifetime membership in me Inc., although it's not required for your pro bono case." A grin spreads across Ben's face. "I don't know if any of this is going to happen, but just thinking about it lifts my spirits, and if the money comes through like you say, I'll definitely invest in a lifetime membership." After signing a few papers, Ben retired to his room for a restful night before the wedding. The next day, the snowstorm of the previous day had cleared, leaving a bright sunny day. The Press anticipated the bride's satisfaction with the weather. Although the temperature remained in the 20s, the lack of wind made the cold tolerable. With the wedding set for 1:30 p.m., Press leisurely perused the paper for an hour, observing media bias, a skill honed during his training. At 12:45 p.m., he settled into the back row of the church on the groom's side, ready for the ceremony. Once seated, Press scanned the room for the videographer, who had not spotted him. He got up to look. When the designated videographer was absent, Press would resort to using his handheld camera, although he preferred not to because of the expected lower quality. Eventually, he found the videographer on the balcony in an ideal shooting position. Satisfied, Press returned to his seat at exactly 1:30. The organist stopped his random pieces and began the wedding march. Gary, the best man, and the groom's friends had already gathered at one side of the altar. The bride, accompanied by her father, slowly walked down the aisle. When the bride and groom reached the altar, the priest began the ceremony by asking Gary Lewis Harris if he would take Belinda Marie Cummings to be his lawful wife, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, in riches and in poverty, forsaking all others, until death do them part. Gary remained silent for several tense moments. His gaze is fixed on Belinda. Murmurs ripple through the assembled guests because of the delay in his answer. Then, turning to the congregation, Gary's voice rang out, rejecting Belinda as his wife. With the push of a button, footage of Belinda's infidelity flooded the screens, sparking chaos. Belinda and her mother screamed, while some guests hurriedly left the church, watching Spencer's petulant expression as Gary approached him. "Gary, it's me, your best man," Spencer whispered, cut off by Gary's punch landing on his nose, the sound of breaking bone echoing through the church as Spencer staggered backwards, blood staining the priest and parts of Belinda's dress. Belinda broke down in hysterical sobs, her mother trying to comfort her. Meanwhile, Belinda's father, his face crimson with rage, disowned her on the spot. In the midst of the chaos, Gary's friends rescued Jason hesitated, unsure of their next move. Jason stepped forward with a raised hand. "That thing on the ground is garbage," he declared menacingly. "If you stand by it, you're no friend of ours." The groomsmen, looking at Jason and the incriminating footage, shook their heads in agreement. "I want nothing to do with this idiot," muttered one of them. Jason then helped the fallen Spencer to his feet. "Listen, Spencer." Jason's voice boomed with contempt. "You're a low life, and everyone here knows it now. We've been friends forever, and this is how you repay Gary. Not only were you supposed to be his best man, but you're also an Ada. How do you think your boss will react when he sees this on his desk on Monday and the bar association? You're in a world of trouble. So do everybody a favor and get out of here, and don't bother keeping our numbers." Spencer slinked away from Jason and vanished through a door at the church's rear. Meanwhile, Gary retrieved the package Mr. Fulton had given him the previous night and stashed it behind a column near the altar. From it, he produced photos of Belinda with other men and distributed them. First the groomsmen received them, then Belinda and her mother. "Here are some mementos for you," Gary remarked, dropping a stack into Belinda's lap. She looked up at him, anguish in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Gary, I love you." Gary shook his head, a sardonic grin on his face. "Let me get this straight. You show your love by fooling around with Spencer. You truly are promiscuous, Belinda. You need help, but thankfully that's not my problem. Best of luck with your miserable life. Please, Gary, give me another chance," she pleaded. As he walked away, Gary shot back over his shoulder. No chance. He strode down the aisle, scattering photos onto the pews. His father caught up, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Let's go, Gary. The reception's still on. We might as well grab a bite." Gary glanced at his father's resigned smile. "Hold on, Dad. There's someone else who needs to see these pictures." Gary approached the sturdy gray-haired man, Belinda's boss at the renowned financial firm where she'd been employed for 2 years. "Mr. Turner, I'm Gary Harris," Gary addressed him. "We met at your company's Christmas parties, Gary." "I remember," Mr. Turner responding by standing up and helping his wife to her feet. "I'm really sorry about what happened." Gary pulled out half a dozen and snapshots. "I'd like you to have these pictures." "No need, Gary," Mr. Turner replied. "I've seen enough." "They're not for you," Gary clarified and offered them to Mrs. Turner. "They're for you, Mrs. Turner, pictures of you and Belinda. You had her spread out on your desk, making a mockery of her. I hope you treasure these pictures as much as your husband and Belinda treasure this moment." Turning to his father, Gary said, "I'm ready to go." "Dad, press record." The exchange smiled, and after confirming details with the videographer, the press returned to his room. He had to write his report and review the videotape of his conversation with Gary and Jason to make sure everything was included. Press reviewed his report twice. He then reviewed the interview with Gary and Jason, checking off each item on his checklist. He began by outlining Mink's mission to ensure equal treatment for men under the law and to support members facing infidelity. Attendees learned that divorce laws often favor women, granting them primary custody and alimony, even when both parents are equally capable. Meehan advocated for fair alimony limits and emphasized the importance of women re-entering the workforce. They also proposed shared custody arrangements where parents alternate residences every 2 weeks, providing more time with children. Press stressed the need for contraception, warning men to distrust claims of birth control use, as unplanned pregnancies could result from unprotected lovemaking. The feminist movement instilled the idea that women should have sole control over pregnancy decisions to sad managing men. While men supported a woman's right to choose abortion, they objected to women avoiding financial responsibility after choosing to keep a child. over a man's objections. A woman could choose to have an abortion, but if she chose to keep the child, the man had no legal say, but was often required to pay child support, which Mank considered unfair. The ringing phone startled the press, who rarely received calls. While in the field, he usually checked in with his wife every night, so an unexpected call from her suggested urgency. Occasionally, the office would get back to him, but this interruption made him put down his tablet and answer the phone. "Hey, Turner, something's come up," said Press's boss, James Baker. "I'm sorry, but you're going to have to stay an extra day." "What's going on?" "We have another project in Aachen tomorrow, and the local representative is sick. You just need to be there for the shoot. Make sure you film everything, not just audio. The bonus for the extra day has been approved and will be in your next paycheck. Don't worry, my camera is charged, and I'm always up for some extra cash." Press grinned, "But you know me. I'm committed to what we do." "Your commitment is appreciated. I'll email you the details. Your flights have been rescheduled to avoid the blizzard. Sorry to take you away from your family. Hope you get out before the storm hits." They're predicting 15 to 20 inches of snow after the call. Press was waiting for the email. The case involved a woman who aspired to be a movie star, married to a successful screenwriter. Although he wanted to stay, he had other commitments during their 5-year marriage. She had affairs with industry insiders, hoping to further her career. Currently involved with Hollywood star Kirk Southern, she secured roles in his upcoming films. Press made sure all logistics were covered, going above and beyond the demands of his roles. The project was meticulously planned and executed. He then checked his email for updated flight details. He turned his focus back to the video. The press found the men's reactions to me in the presentations fascinating, especially Gary's and Jason's. But the topic that got the most reaction was DNA testing. Me Inc. lobbied for mandatory DNA testing for newborns in every state. Currently, men face challenges in proving paternity within a short time frame, leaving them financially responsible for children who aren't theirs. The proposed law would allow men to stop paying for non-biological children at any time. Press eagerly took note of every point discussed. Watching the presentation on his tablet, he paused the video at one point when he hadn't considered his wife's refusal to make love in his previous marriage. While financial disputes remained the leading cause of marital discord, intimacy issues had risen to prominence. Laws had evolved to prohibit husbands from coercing their wives into intimacy, a change supported by the press. However, pondering the purpose of marriage if a spouse could deny closeness without reason, Mank proposed a solution: prenuptial agreements. These agreements addressed infidelity, favoring the faithful spouse with a 70-30 split in the event of cheating. They also mandated a weekly intimacy schedule to ensure that no partner would be rejected. Violation of these terms warranted an 80-20 divorce settlement, with the unfaithful spouse receiving only 20% of the property. Despite some reservations about Me Inc.'s philosophy, Press wholeheartedly supported the organization. He had first-hand experience with their pro bono assistance. When his cheating ex-wife threatened him, Press acknowledged that without their help, his life with Ben would have been even more difficult. The next day, Press left Rose early for an important breakfast appointment. He was to meet with Janet Arnold, a rare occurrence involving a woman. Mank was well prepared for such situations. Spying Janet in a back booth, Press observed her and her 2 children coloring placemats to pass the time. The children, ages 7 and 5, seemed content but occasionally checked in on their mother. Janet, with disheveled dirty blonde hair and no makeup, looked tired despite her pregnancy. Press took comfort in knowing he could ease some of her burden. Initially, When Press encountered cases like this, it surprised him and led him to question why he was helping a woman. He believed Mink's role was to help men. However, Mr. Wagner, a senior vice president, clarified that Mink's goal was true gender equality, not one-sided advocacy. While their primary focus was on helping men, they would also help women if a member was cheating on their spouse. Over time, the press came to appreciate me more. As opposed to seeking a return to outdated gender dynamics by seeking fair laws without bias, the organization sought to uphold the sanctity of marriage and deter infidelity by imposing severe consequences on cheaters. They believed that harsh penalties for infidelity could deter individuals from engaging in affairs. Mrs. Arnold, thank you for meeting with me, Press said as he settled into the booth across from her. I hope you don't mind, Mr. Fulton, she asked nervously, glancing at her children, but my mother couldn't watch the children. No problem, he assured her with a smile. Turning to the hungry children, they've got fantastic pancakes here, loaded with whipped cream and sprinkles. The mention of food. Both children perked up, tugging at Press's heartstrings. You don't have to, Janet protested. You found my husband's account and how I can access the money. We've been short on cash since Thad left. Just tell me, and we'll be on our way. Nonsense, Press insisted, motioning to the waitress. I have a lot to discuss with you. Let's order breakfast, and I'll tell you everything you need to know. A reluctant Janet relented, swayed by the hopeful looks of her children. Press ordered pancakes with whipped cream and sprinkles for the kids, along with bacon, hash browns, and chocolate milk. Janet opted for scrambled eggs, toast, and coffee, while Press chose a Western omelet. After drinks were served, Janet introduced her children, Michael and Terry, ages 7 and 5. Janet explained simply that her husband, Simon, had run off with his secretary, Tammy, leaving behind debts and no financial support. Simon had disappeared, leaving Janet clueless as to his whereabouts. As the children concentrated on their pancakes, the press broke in. I assume you knew about your husband's previous marriage. Janet nodded. He claimed she was being manipulative and planting evidence against him. Exactly, the press confirmed by producing a folder from his briefcase. His first wife, Mary, not only emptied his bank accounts, but also framed him for drug possession. We intervened to prevent a jail sentence. I'm confused. Janet admitted to putting down her fork. Who exactly do you represent, and how did you help Simon? Think of us as an insurance company. Press explained that your husband essentially bought a policy to protect himself from betrayal. Turns out Mary wasn't as smart as she thought. Her fingerprints were found on one of the pill bags, and her supplier implicated her, leading to her arrest. We also traced and recovered the funds that Simon had transferred. Janet seemed satisfied with this explanation and resumed eating. When I first contacted you, Press continued to open the folder. I was just beginning my investigation. Normally, I wouldn't have contacted you so soon, but I understood your urgent need for financial assistance. Since we last spoke, I've uncovered more of your husband's assets. Were you aware of this? Janet shook her head. Thad handled the finances. I concentrated on the children and the house. So far, I've identified about $2 million in liquid assets. He took press releases. He also has silent partnerships in 3 businesses that generate about $10,000 a year. Mrs. Arnold, there's strong evidence that you're entitled to half of those partnerships. Janet's mouth dropped open. After a brief pause, she leaned forward with sad eyes. That may be true, but I can't afford to fight my husband. I don't even have money for a divorce lawyer. Mrs. Arnold, don't worry, Press reassured her, patting her hand. We've found you a top-notch lawyer. He'll be in touch with you soon. Your husband will pay the legal fees as per the court order. We've also located him in Costa Rica with his girlfriend. His assets are frozen, except for what's allotted for your living expenses. Tears welled in Janet's eyes as she shook. This isn't some cruel joke, is it? I assure you, it's all true. Press assured her, handing her an envelope with supporting documents. Before you leave, I'll help you access the first account privately. Follow me to this empty table where we can talk without disturbing your children. Janet gave Press a quizzical look before instructing the children to behave and moved to a nearby table. Once settled, the children remained engrossed in their meal. Press broached the sensitive subject. Your husband isn't exactly honorable, but you probably knew he crossed a line, and our policy outlines the consequences if he breaks the rules. Rule number 1, no cheating. Confusion clouds Janet's face. What kind of consequences? Well, most of his remaining assets, after you get your share, will go to pay fines to me Incorporated. He won't go bankrupt, but his lifestyle will plummet. After jail, Janet shouted louder than she meant. Why tax evasion and currency violations? He'll get at least 6 months, and in case you're wondering, his secretary Tammy is stuck in Costa Rica with nothing. It won't be easy for her to return without her passport, which Thad has stashed away. Janet's face lit up with a grin, followed by Hardy's laughter. After she signed a stack of legal papers, Press stood up. Well, I've got to go, but before he put on his winter coat, he pulled an envelope from his pocket. Here's $500. Get some winter clothes for you and the kids, then have fun. After saying goodbye to the children, Janet planted a kiss on his cheek. I'm not quite sure what's going on, but I'm really grateful. Janet said Press paid the bill as he left and headed to Aachen, where another project awaited him. The next day, he gathered in a conference room at the offices of Moreland Connor and Stiles. These attorneys were representing Beverly Bracken in her divorce case. Gloria Connor was handling the litigation and negotiations. They were known for their aggressive tactics in divorce cases. This firm rarely suffered defeat. However, today was an exception. Their most devastating loss. But Paul Bracken had Elliot Chalmers to represent him, an indescribable middle-aged man who looked more like a British civil servant than a lawyer. Paul sat with Elliot and the press on one side of the table. Between the other 2 men on the opposite side sat Mrs. Bracken, Gloria Connor, for paralegals, a court stenographer, and a secretary who finalized both Paul's and Beverly's notes. Paul, with his black hair and charming demeanor, was undeniably handsome and regaled the press and Elliot with tales of his time in Hollywood. Beverly, on the other hand, was a striking beauty whose blonde hair, blue eyes, and flawless figure commanded attention. Yet beneath her allure lurked a sense of insincerity, most evident in her smile, which never quite reached her eyes. Nevertheless, Beverly's beauty was undeniable, which explained Paul's attraction to her. Before we begin, Press announced that he would stand up and place his camera bag on the table. I'd like to set up my camera to document this meeting. That's not possible. Gloria interjected with a dismissive wave of her hand. Filming is not allowed here, unless it's for a court deposition. So I'm sorry, but you're going to have to put that camera away. The press looked at Elliot and demanded an immediate response. If we can't film, we'll leave, and the deal is off. We'll have to renegotiate from scratch. You can't do that. Beverly interjected anxiously. Just then, Kirk Southern walked into the room and nodded to everyone before fixing his gaze on Beverly. "Just letting you know I'm here," he said before disappearing, the press watching the occupants, noticing that even Gloria was wearing a dreamy expression. Chuckling to himself, he caught Beverly's pleading look, which elicited a reluctant nod from Gloria. "Fine. Mr. Fulton, you may set up your camera." Gloria admitted her obvious irritation. "Consider it an exception." Once the camera was set up and running, they discussed the details of the divorce. The house was to be sold with the proceeds split evenly, but press knew the market offered little equity. Similarly, the money was to be divided equally, though there wasn't much since Paul was primarily focused on writing and living off the royalties from his last TV series. As for those royalties, Paul offered them to Beverly in lieu of alimony. "Beverly, just to be clear," Paul interjected, addressing Gloria, "you will receive royalties from the Gobbler Twins TV series. Because I'm giving you full rights to it. You relinquish any claim to my stamp or comic book collection. In addition, you relinquish all rights to any past or future works of mine. I don't care about your comic books." Beverly dismissed. "I have everything I need." One remaining issue was child support for Sarah Bracken, who was almost a year old. Gloria objected to the language that Paul would provide $1,500 per month to support any offspring he and Beverly might have. "I prefer that Sarah be specifically named." Gloria insisted on listening, and Paul snapped angrily. "I want nothing more to do with this woman, who will soon be my ex-wife. She's promiscuous and will sleep with anyone. I'm sure of it, because Beverly had physical relations with me just before the divorce papers were served. Who knows, she could even be pregnant right now. I'm not going to revisit this. The agreement stands. Unless you want to renegotiate, Mr. Bracken, I won't tolerate that kind of language," Gloria retorted, her face flushed with anger. "Furthermore, I believe the language in this agreement needs to be changed. I'll accept the language as it is." Beverly promptly interjected, despite Gloria's attempts to dissuade her. Beverly seemed determined to finalize the divorce. They finished with the last item, and both Paul and Beverly signed the document. The witnesses followed suit, and then the notary public stamped it. Copies were given to Beverly. Paul and each lawyer sorted everything. Paul asked as everyone nodded. He stood up and declared, "Thank God, it's over and I'm no longer married to that horrible woman." Beverly and Gloria winced, prompting Gloria to intervene. "I've made it clear that I will not tolerate that kind of language. I suggest you leave before security escorts you out before Paul can react." The door opened and Kirk walked in. Beverly greeted him with a kiss on the cheek and a hug. To the surprise of most, Kirk held out his hand to Paul. "Hey, Paul, how have you been?" "I'm doing great, Kirk," Paul replied and shook his hand. "I'm no longer married to that unfaithful woman. I had heard rumors about her Hollywood reputation, but I didn't believe them," Kirk remarked as he took Beverly's hand. "Looks like you were right, but I still won the bet." "Yes, you did." Paul laughed, "but it was worth it." "What bet?" Beverly asked, confused. "Do you two know each other?" Kirk smiled. "Paul and I have known each other since college." "What was the bet?" Paul and Kirk laughed together. Now Gloria and her assistants were confused. "Well, Beverly," Paul grinned, "I bet Kirk that he couldn't win over my faithful, loving wife." "I lost, but Kirk, you said you loved me." Beverly burst into tears. "Welling, you promised to marry me when I got my divorce." "Beverly, when you married Paul, you swore to leave everyone else behind," Kirk said, shaking his head when I found out about the other men you were involved with after the wedding. That was the end of it. Beverly broke down in sobs, and it took Gloria 5 minutes to comfort her. When Beverly regained some composure, Paul sat next to her and squeezed her hand. "Beverly, I may be slow, but I really believed you loved me," he admitted, "but when I found out the truth a year later, I was furious. I wanted an immediate divorce. Then I thought of Sarah and realized I had to wait, but when the DNA test showed she wasn't mine, I knew you had to learn a lesson." Beverly paled. "The mention of the DNA test. That's why you insisted on the vision." Gloria muttered angrily. "You set us up. This whole ordeal has been a sham. It was designed to deceive my client. I demand that the entire divorce petition be thrown out. You need more than luck." Attorney Elliott remarked with an odd smile. "My client had no intention of deceiving anyone. According to your client, she got exactly what she wanted. If there's any deception here, it's your client trying to pass off her child as Mr. Bracken's. If you think you have a case, run with it. As far as I'm concerned, the evidence in this room speaks volumes." The room fell silent, broken only by Beverly's sobs. Then Paul addressed her directly. "Beverly, look at me." His ex-wife raised her eyes. Paul sighed deeply. "I'll be honest with you. I thought humiliating you would give me satisfaction, but it didn't. I loved you with all my heart. Even after I learned of your betrayal, a part of me still cared for you. Kirk was right about your reputation. Every producer and director knew you'd do anything for a part. I guess I was the only one who did not know your true character." Beverly struggled to catch her breath, her chest heaving noticeably with each inhalation. Press watched and realized that Paul still had feelings for her. "Do you remember when you got the part of the Gobbler twins?" he asked. Beverly nodded. "I thought all my hard work had paid off, but you didn't help me at all." She replied, "You're wrong." Paul denied it. "While I was encouraging you to succeed on your own, I was secretly pulling strings to secure this role, because you're lying." Beverly countered. "I earned that role. I wanted you to believe that, but the truth is, I had to make sacrifices for it. I gave up a portion of my future royalties, which will stop in about 2 years. Paul admitted that Beverly's expression betrayed her disbelief. Gloria realized her mistake, having never checked the status of the royalties. Her humiliation was dwarfed by Beverly's realization. Beverly, proud of her accomplishment, now grasped its origins in her husband's sacrifice, prompting more tears. "I won't let Sarah down," Paul gently assured her, "though not my biological daughter. I care deeply for her. I've set up a trust fund for her with $20,000, which will grow to $50,000. The interest will cover Sarah's expenses with audits of submitted bills. When she's 25, the trust will be hers. As for you, keep the serial royalties. You'll need them. Beverly, let's face it, your acting skills are not top-notch. Given your reputation, you could land small roles until your looks fade, if you're okay with trading favors for roles. Go ahead," Paul remarked, igniting a flash of hostility in Beverly's face. Despite her anger, she turned to Kirk for comfort and remained silent. Paul sighed. "Sadly, in all these years, Beverly, I doubt you've cared about anyone but yourself. Someday you'll find love, and I hope it treats you better than I did," he said, glancing at Kirk before continuing. "But today may bring you that pain, and if so, I sympathize." He rose slowly. "This is our last conversation. Beverly, contact Elliott if you need me to take care of Sarah or face the consequences." After saying goodbye, they left together. Beverly sobbed into her arms, and the press quickly packed up and headed for the airport before the impending blizzard shut it down. A year later, Preston Turner sat in the chair across from his boss, James Baker, for the annual review. Press knew that all of his cases were reviewed periodically when they were filed, but during the annual review, his boss scrutinized cases that Press believed should have been resolved. Today, Press wanted to close 3 cases from Cleveland and 1 from Aachen. After reviewing Press's laudable annual review, the two men delved into evaluating the cases to determine their closure. Review this project with Gary and Jason, and explain why you recommend they be closed. Mr. Baker instructed the president to summon Gary Harris and Jason Whitten. Press referred to his file. In case you've forgotten, the two were about to get married, but we exposed Gary's fiancée as a serial cheater. Gary publicly humiliated Belinda at a church service before walking out. Yes, I remember that video, Mr. Baker nodded. I almost felt sorry for her. It seemed she really cared for Gary, but how is she holding up? After her infidelity came to light, Belinda left Cleveland. She ended up in Las Vegas, where she works as a waitress and part-time dealer. She keeps in touch with her mother, but her father refuses to communicate with her after the failed marriage. Belinda continues to date several men. Interestingly, she still has memories of Gary and occasionally writes to him. Surprisingly, Gary seems to have forgiven her and sometimes answers her letters. But a reconciliation is out of the question. Gary is now in a serious relationship with Linda Chire, and according to my sources is planning to propose within the next 2 months. What about the best man treatment? Actually, we didn't have to intervene. The district attorney fired him, and the Bar Association suspended his license for 5 years. He lost all his friends and left town shortly after the wedding debacle. Belinda's boss, his wife, took him to the cleaners in their divorce. He's not destitute, but he's lost half his assets, and his 3 children no longer speak to him or Jason Whitten. He married Melissa, and they seem genuinely happy. Also, Melissa willingly signed a prenup. Oh, and they're expecting their first child any day now. Mr. Baker grinned. I agree to close both cases. Now, what's the update on the Ben Sharpen case? As expected, Ben successfully sued and recovered the child support he paid for the children from their biological fathers. But Ben achieved more than just a refund. As you'll recall, we traced his ex-wife's hidden overseas drug trafficking assets. After deducting Ben's alimony payments and awarding him $30,000 in damages, we turned the remaining funds over to the IRS. The lawsuit against the law firm and the financial institution was successful. After legal fees, Ben received nearly $2 million. All 3 of the biological fathers divorced their wives. 2 attorneys attempted to secure prenuptial agreements for their wives, but these were invalidated because the husbands failed to secure independent review by their wives' attorneys. Each father received substantial settlements in their divorces. As for Ben, he left the Cleveland Clinic and started several of his own medical facilities, and he found a partner, Linda Crawford, who used to be a nurse at the Cleveland Clinic and now works at one of Ben's clinics. Ben also joined a gym and has lost 40 pounds to date. What about his ex-wife and their children? Mr. Baker inquired. Mrs. Sharpen was convicted on several charges, including drug trafficking and tax evasion. The drugs she distributed were linked to the death of a teenager. She received sentences ranging from 20 years to life. Her children received sentences ranging from 5 to 7 years. Her 4 most recent associates also received prison sentences, but I didn't go into their lengths because they weren't part of our project. Excellent work. I also agree to close this case. The Janet Arnold case was especially satisfying. The press continued without interruption. I am very pleased with the outcome. Mrs. Arnold and her children had been overindulged by one of our associates, which was embarrassing. I recall that the case, as Mr. Baker acknowledged, was discussed at length at several meetings of the executive committee. Do you think we can close it now? Yes, sir. The final judgments have been made. Mrs. Arnold was awarded half of the assets we were able to locate. Initially, I suspected there were more assets hidden, but given Mr. Arnold's financial situation, I'm confident we've recovered everything. And how is Mr. Arnold doing? Following Mrs. Arnold's settlement, we paid Mr. Arnold's back taxes with interest. As you know, we never reimbursed the government for interest. Given the lengthy processing times for additional tax assessments due to their inefficiency, we don't believe they are entitled to interest. Nevertheless, after the settlement, Mr. Arnold was left with just under $20,000. Although this amount exceeds the maximum allowable withholding for breach of contract, I was prepared to proceed. However, one of his partnership ventures failed, leaving him with only about $3,000. He's now in the business of selling used cars. What about the other two partnerships? Mr. Baker inquired that even receiving half of his share of the income would exceed the allowable maximum. To offset his share of the losses from the failed partnership, he had to sell his interest in the other two. However, we made sure that Mrs. Arnold's claim was settled before he sold his shares. She's now receiving her rightful income. And here's another detail. Press grinned and produced a document stating that there had been a paperwork snafu with the extradition warrant. Mr. Arnold spent 3 months in a Costa Rican jail. He went in a little overweight and came out a lot slimmer. The marshals were reportedly annoyed because they'd never seen a man so eager to return to a U.S. prison. Just out of curiosity, Press's boss inquired as to what had become of the woman Mr. Arnold had escaped with. "Aw, Tammy." Press smiled. It took her almost 2 months to re-enter the United States. After experiencing a period of hardship in Costa Rica, she probably gained a new appreciation for America. Still, she struggled to find employment because of her past behavior with her former employer. She eventually landed a job as an administrative assistant. To my knowledge, she hasn't returned to her former gold-digging ways. However, we're keeping an eye on her, and if she resumes such behavior, especially with one of our members, we'll take action. I prefer to err on the side of caution. Mr. Baker pondered the report. Perhaps we'll keep this case open for a while to monitor Tammy's actions and see if Mr. Arnold has any additional undisclosed assets. Now for the last case. Mr. Paul Bracken, I'm an aware by nature, but I'd like you to familiarize yourself with the results. The divorce was contested, but the court denied it. Mr. Bracken is currently producing a new TV series called Runaway Husbands*. He signed a deal with the studio that has owned the show since its debut. It is consistently in the top 10 and has already secured a 2-year renewal. Interestingly, in my opinion, the role of the narrator seems tailor-made for Paul's ex-wife, Beverly. I can't shake the feeling that he had her in mind for the role, and whether Mr. Southern managed to escape Beverly's influence. Mr. Baker grinned. Their relationship ended that day, and I think Mr. Bracken was right when he predicted that Beverly would fall in love and possibly be betrayed. From what I've observed, Beverly had feelings for Kirk and was devastated when he left her. She didn't see him for 6 months after that and only dated him occasionally. Currently, Beverly works as a real estate agent and doesn't seem to be romantically involved with anyone. She seems to devote most of her non-working hours to her daughter, Sarah. Surprisingly, she's proving to be a much better mother than expected. Oh, and she also makes occasional appearances at the local community theater. It's not directly within your purview, but since you approached me, I thought I'd review it based on the results. I'm inclined to close it. Finishing his assessment, Press began to stand. If there's nothing else, I'll return to my duties. Yes, I have one more matter I'd like to discuss with you. Mr. Baker gestured for Press to return to his seat. What might that be, sir? As you know, we recently passed the 2 million milestone, and our expansion is proceeding faster than anticipated. We need more representatives in the field, especially qualified regional supervisors. I received approval this morning, and you are being promoted to one of those supervisory roles. Congratulations. The press was stunned, but managed to express their gratitude to Mr. Baker. You've earned it. Press. Your performance has been outstanding. You'll start your new job on Monday. I must warn you, however, that 3 or 4 of the projects your new team is handling are currently experiencing significant difficulties. I'm confident you'll be able to resolve them. Good luck. They shook hands and Press left his boss's office with a grin on his face.